The snow had started falling just after dusk, the quiet kind that softened the edges of the world and made even a tired city feel gentle. Mark Hale pulled his coat tighter as he stepped out of the bus station, the duffel bag at his feet worn thin from years of being dragged across foreign soil. Christmas lights blinked along the street, cheerful and oblivious, and for the first time since he'd left the Navy SEALs, Mark felt truly unanchored. No mission, no team, just the weight of memories and a holiday that had never stopped reminding him of who hadn't come home. He was heading toward a cheap motel when he saw them, huddled near a closed bakery, illuminated by a flickering street lamp. A woman sat on a flattened cardboard box, her coat too thin for the cold, her shoulders curved inward as if she were trying to disappear. 2 children pressed against her sides, a boy maybe 8 and a girl a few years younger, both wearing knit hats that didn't quite cover their ears. Between them sat a single grocery bag, the kind you get when you don't have enough to fill a cart. Mark slowed without meaning to. Years of training had taught him to scan, assess, move on. But something about the way the woman stroked her daughter's hair, whispering words meant to sound brave, rooted him in place. He told himself it wasn't his business. He told himself he'd already given enough of himself to the world. Still, he found his feet turning back. "Ma'am," he said gently, careful not to startle them. The woman looked up, eyes wary but tired rather than afraid. Up close, Mark could see the strain etched into her face, the kind that came from holding it together for too long. "You okay out here?" he asked, knowing the answer. She hesitated, then gave a small, apologetic smile. "We're fine," she said, the lie thin as paper. "Just waiting for a friend." The boy looked up at Mark, his eyes too serious for his age, and shook his head almost imperceptibly. The woman noticed and closed her eyes for a moment. "I'm sorry," she added quietly. "My name's Elena. This is Noah and Lily, my husband. He passed last year. We lost our place last month. I thought I could make it work." Her voice broke and she turned away, ashamed of the tears. Mark felt something shift in his chest, a familiar tightening he usually pushed down. He thought of his teammates, of empty bunks and folded flags, of Christmas nights spent overseas wishing for warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "Come with me," he said before he could overthink it. The words surprised him as much as they did her. Elena stared at him, alarm flashing across her face. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly," Mark added quickly. "But it's cold, and no one should be out here tonight. I can get you a warm meal, a place to sleep." They walked a few blocks to a small diner that smelled like coffee and cinnamon, the kind that stayed open because loneliness didn't keep office hours. The kid's eyes widened as Mark ordered hot chocolate topped with too much whipped cream, pancakes shaped like snowmen, and a turkey dinner with all the sides. Elena tried to protest, but Mark shook his head. "Let me," he said simply, watching the kids eat, color returning to their faces, something inside him loosened. When Lily laughed, a high, surprised sound, Mark felt tears sting his eyes and looked away. After dinner, Mark did something he hadn't planned. He booked them 2 rooms at the motel he'd been heading to, insisting on separate spaces so Elena wouldn't feel cornered. As they stood in the lobby, Elena finally asked, "Why are you doing this?" Mark considered the question. "Because once," he said slowly, "someone did it for me, and because I know what it's like to survive and still feel lost." He didn't tell her about the nights he woke up sweating, or the guilt he carried for being alive. He didn't need to. The next morning, Christmas Day, Mark returned with breakfast and a small box wrapped in newspaper. Inside were 2 modest toys he'd picked up at a convenience store, nothing fancy but enough to make the kids gasp as if it were magic. Elena covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "You don't have to do any more," she said. Mark smiled softly. "I want to. What Elena didn't know was that Mark had spent the night on his phone, calling old contacts, asking favors he hated asking. By noon, he had arranged a temporary apartment through a veterans' charity he volunteered with, one that helped families in crisis. By evening, he'd lined up an interview for Elena at a local community center looking for an administrative assistant. When he told her, she sat down hard on the bed, sobbing into her hands. "I thought the world was done with us," she whispered. "No," Mark said, his voice steady though his heart was pounding. "It's not." Weeks passed. Elena started working. The kids enrolled in school. Mark helped them move, fix a leaky sink, hang Christmas drawings long after the holiday had passed. Somewhere along the way he realized the nightmares had softened. The silence in his apartment no longer felt like an enemy. On the anniversary of that snowy night, Elena invited him over for dinner. The table was crowded, warm, alive with noise. Before they ate, Noah raised his glass of apple juice. "To Mark," he said solemnly, "who found us when we were invisible." Mark swallowed hard. He'd once believed his purpose ended with his service, that whatever good he had to give was already spent. But sitting there, surrounded by a family that existed because he'd stopped to care, he understood something profound. Humanity didn't require grand gestures, only the courage to say, "Come with me," when someone was lost, and sometimes in lifting others out of the cold, you found your own way home.